Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, walking the spiritual walk. Thank you for joining me again this weekend as we do the reading for the next chapter from the book I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. We're moving on to chapter 4, and the title of the chapter is This Business of Making Character, subtitled Science. And I will be reading out of 1934 printing of the book I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. You can also get a facsimile reprint of the pages. I don't know why I have such a hard time with that word. And it's called Believing in False Gods, I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. That's the cover right there. I usually do the highlighting and everything in that book, obviously, because I want to keep the integrity of this book. So let's get to it. Just real quick. And here we go. This is chapter 4 of the book I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen, titled The Business of Making Character. This business of making character, science. Finding that schools of philosophy offered nothing but an endless merry-go-round of sterile thinking and futile debate, finding that the church had either ceased to have an effective message or had lost the art of passing it on, I, like so many of this age, turned to the school of science. I knew that, on the physical level, the body was to absorb violet rays in order to grow. Similarly, on the intellectual level, the growing mind was to take in rays of learning from more developed minds. To grow morally and thus really begin to live in my third or theistic scheme of life, I felt that I needed some kind of spiritual ray to stimulate my dormant soul. Spiritual awakening. It was clear that this spiritual light was not shining into my soul. Science, I thought, might show me a way. Might show me why. It occurred to me, for instance, that sunlight could not penetrate a dense body, that the rays from a learned brain might not penetrate a dense mind, and that perhaps a spiritual light, if any such thing existed, could not penetrate a dense character. My pagan nature was, perhaps, too coarse, too sullied, selfish, and sinful to be sensitive to any spiritual environment, or to let this light of truth shine through. I could see more, I believed, if, somehow, I could clear myself up, much as I would clean a dirty window. And even though, like Drummond's thermometer, I might have to rely on some outside force to send my moral mercury up to a new level, I would still, I thought, have to undertake a course of self-improvement. I would still have to clean the glass before those rays of outside force could reach me. Here, I was sure science could be of great help to me, for scientific books on self-improvement could be counted by the score. The first step in clearing oneself up, I thought, and especially in clearing up society, was to clean up one's physical surroundings. If a man were born into an atmosphere of cleanliness, fresh air, and loving, intelligent care, all other things being equal, he should have a better chance to develop refinement and clear moral vision than if his seed had fallen into the filth, neglect, and darkness of the slums. Sociological control of the environment, supplemented, if possible, by eugenic control of the seed itself, would be the first requirements in my scientific course of soul culture. The growing principle as well, I believed, should be strongly stimulated, and this stimulation, I decided, could come through the inspiration received from good books, good schools, good churches, and good men. Especially essential seemed the inspiration of example. The example of some full-grown soul we could look and work towards as we moved along the line of growth. As the books on how to succeed would say, set a goal. Desire it with all your heart, work towards it with all your energy. I would have to have a definite goal to desire and work for, and despite my previous disdain for churchmen, I felt that the moral scientists could well borrow their example and set up the goal of Jesus Christ. I considered the separate steps by which I must refine my nature in order to grow in that direction of a Christ-like character. This called, as I could see, for a very considerable stride, from a nature ruled to a large degree, as mine was, by lusts and selfishness, and jealousies and hates, to a nature lighted by love and charity and kindness. Despite the emergent possibilities of evolution, this new character, I felt, represented too big a jump to pop into existence full-born. It called rather for an evolution by slow and gradual stages. I had heard, of course, of overnight conversions, but I did not think that such sudden leaps from slime to the sublime were likely to endure. And even if they did, I was quite sure that transformations of this kind must be the result of a long warming up before the boiling point was reached. This whole process, I believed, could be greatly aided and speeded up by our modern knowledge of psychology. The laws of association would help us to catch a Christ-like character, while sublimation of the libido into higher, more creative activities, the elimination of my baser desires through the expulsive power of a higher affection, and other methods of applied psychology would aid in the climb from mere selfish consciousness through the stage of social consciousness and up to the sublime God consciousness of a man in the spirit, which might prove to be the most real one of all. My whole scheme, in short, reduced itself to the following formula. I was to raise myself and the rest of the world with me from the existing and chaotic state of 1. Egoism, through the higher but equally futile plan of humanism, and into the highest and only creative plan of theism, passing, as we went through the 3 evolutionary stages of self-consciousness, social consciousness, and God consciousness. This clarification, evolution, or growth, would be accomplished by 1. Preparation through eugenic control of stock and social control of environment. 2. Stimulation through books, schools, churches, men, and especially through the high example of Jesus of Nazareth. And 3. Progress from present stages through gradual evolutionary steps. 4. Acceleration through the methods of applied psychology. Quite a formula. It seemed, on the whole, a sensible and effective program. The great mind of a certain VC Kitchen advertising man, I thought, was now attaining something where the comparatively feeble minds of philosophers, ecclesiastics, and scientists had failed. After a little reflection, however, the plan did not seem quite so excellent. It would take many years and far more than my paltry powers to convince the world that it should adopt eugenic and sociological control. Such remote control, even if applied, might benefit my great-great-grandchildren, but it could scarcely be used to help me apply my philosophy of life. When, moreover, I came to apply the stimulating influence of Christ's example, nothing more resulted than before. The fact that I knew Jesus to be honest and loving and unselfish and pure did not make me honest or loving or unselfish or pure. The truth is that deep down I did not want to be. The truth is that deep down I did not want to be. I could not, therefore, follow the advice of the success books. While I had set a goal, I did not desire it with all my heart. And failing this, I could not work towards it with all my energy. Jesus' moral and spiritual qualities were admirable, very admirable indeed. But the only things I seemed to desire with all my heart were to be left largely alone, to find plenty of cocktails when I got home at night, and somehow fall heir to about $20 million. How could I grow from these desires into Jesus' way of rising above material matters? Through my gradual evolutionary steps, of course. But what were the next steps that I should take? Dante, describing the progress of a pilgrim soul, wrote that to such a soul, at first, small goods seemed great. Wherefore, he continues, we see children desire exceedingly an apple, and then, proceeding further, desire a little bird, and further still a beautiful dress, and then a horse, and then a woman. And then the riches, not great, and then greater, and then as great as can be. As this happens, because in none of these does she find what she is seeking, the trusts to find it further on, and trusts to find it further on. These indeed are evolutionary steps, and that indeed has been my own soul's evolutionary history. But having chased my pleasure, possessions, and power, and position, and applause, in none of which had I found what I was seeking, and then seeming to see a greater good in philosophy, and then in the possibilities of the church, and then in science, and still not finding what I sought, what should my next step be? There was still, of course, a further step in science. I had, as yet, applied no psychology, and men, said psychologists, could sublimate their desires and expel their baser aims through the power of a higher affection. But that was just the point. I saw no further affection towards which I could turn. Recently, for instance, a friend of mine went through a psychological cure for drinking. It did not last, and the psychologist excused himself by saying the patient did not really want to stop drinking. He had tried to interest the drinker in hobbies, golf, stamp collecting, and whatnot. This was on the theory, I suppose, that desire to do right can be strengthened if the sufferer is led into some other form of self-expression associated with a new pleasure experience. Turn the experience of abstinence into fun, and a psychologist can make us want it. But try to convince a man whose fun is alcoholic and who finds expression in dancing on a table that he will find greater fun in going dry combined with stamp collecting. And as in the case of the friend I mentioned, you will find that he very soon falls off the wagon. In his whole bag of tricks, the psychologist has no high affection to compare with the alcoholic's love for alcohol, nor in most cases with the ordinary man's plain love of self. There it is. Even if psychologists could and should learn the laws by which desires are shaped, they would still lack the genius to change the pagan's deep conviction that it's no fun to be good, unless they found a way to put their subjects in conscious touch with God. I, as I now could see, had been making the same mistake. I had been telling people that they were living to grow a soul without alleviating this growth into the position of a higher affection and making them really want to grow. I had been trying to offer the public a cure for educational failure, marriage difficulties, business troubles, social injustice, political corruption, and religious ineffectiveness without first convincing readers on the idea of wanting to take the cure. As an advertising man, I should have known much better than that. Arouse desire is the first commandment of my trade. I had, of course, done what I could to arouse this desire. I had written my entire book of what we call reason why copy. I had presented all the reasons I could think of to prove that people really are living to grow a soul and will find no true success in life at anything else. But since I myself did not know how to put them in touch with God's approval, I could not infect them with the pleasure of this act. Since I myself, moreover, did not know the pleasure of God's approval, I myself did not look forward to being good with any great zest. I could see at last that on my whole proposition, I had failed really to convince myself. I could see that growing a soul in God's service was something that I ought to live for, and that I felt was why I could not find or take my next evolutionary step. Science says that we evolve by adaptation to environment, but it does not say just how you adapt yourself to an environment with which you have never come in touch. And if such exists, it does not say how you get in touch with a spiritual environment. As yet, science seems to have confined itself to a study of the world of form. It has not begun to explore in the world of significance. It has not evolved a science of the spirit, though many scientists believe that someday they must and will find the existence of a spiritual domain. Before his death, Thomas A. Edison said that he believed he had gone ahead about as far as we could materially without taking time to catch up spiritually. And as Charles Steinmetz declared, spiritual power in the 20th century is as dormant as was electrical power when Franklin flew his famous kite. The next great discoveries will lie in the domain of the spiritual. Science may make these discoveries in the spiritual domain. The scientific discovery and application of spiritual power at some dim and distant date may benefit my children's children's children, like the adoption of eugenic or sociological control of birth and environment. However, that could scarcely come to pass in time to start me growing my own soul. While science theorizes about future generations, the present civilization makes speedily for chaos. When I realized all this, I began to see that until I myself was straightened out, until I had solved the problems of my own life, there was really nothing I could do to unravel the tangles of the other fellow. And that is it. That's a lovely chapter. I love that. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. I'm excited to go through and review that chapter with y'all. So thank y'all for joining me tonight, though. That's where we'll end it. And I will be back next week with another review for chapter 4. And I will be looking forward to it. So until next time, thanks.